today's workshop on time management and productivity, and we're going to take two different perspectives on this. One will be very much about managing your time sort of day to day, and then the other one will be more broadly thinking about a kind of approach to learning, being a little bit more reflective so that it helps prepare us for our next task, which is also a really huge part of managing our time, our kind of expectations of what's possible to achieve for our next project. So I'm going to hand over to Connor, our academic skills librarian, who's going to lead the first part of today's session.
Absolutely. So yeah, as Laura was saying, there's going to be sort of two parts to the workshop today. We're going to go through tips and tricks to do with time management. So anything that might be proving to be an obstacle, things that are going in the way, and then a sort of step-by-step process to sort of analyze maybe your process with how you're managing your time, and then finally going on to some tools. And then Laura's going to take over and to talk about reflective practice. So these all really tie in terms of understanding your own self and the importance of self-knowledge when it comes to time management. So we'll just jump right in. What we really want to emphasize in this workshop is this idea of healthy productivity, because potentially you may have come to Cambridge with these presuppositions about what productivity looks like in Cambridge, or maybe you're looking sideways at other people in Cambridge who do have that attitude of doing as much as possible in as little time as possible. And what we basically want to emphasize is that what healthy productivity looks like for us is not about cramming everything in, but about doing things consistently in a way that's sustainable for you, that doesn't lead you to burnout and that doesn't lead you to be stressed or overwhelmed, but that actually allows you to be happy in your work. So whilst you're doing work, being really motivated and being rewarded by the work that you're doing. So when we talk about productivity, or maybe worse, when things go wrong potentially with the productivity, it's not about self-discipline or being lazy, but it's about habits, and it's about whether or not you align with your habits or whether you'd want to change them. So we're also going to talk about a bit about knowing why you're setting out, what you're setting out to achieve and why, and that's going to lead into the reflective practice as well. Um, so we're going to start off with the obstacles potentially that you might be having surrounding this idea of time management. So there are four that we're going to go through. Obviously, there's lots more, so do feel free to ask any questions. But we're going to start off with good sleep. So this is something that obviously everyone knows, but it is the most simple things that really need to be repeated a lot of the time. So sleep hygiene is this really important thing that can have an impact on your entire sort of life, basically, because of the extremely strong relationship between sleep and your physical and mental health. Okay, so in order to get your day started well, get your week started well, um, things that you can do for yourself that are really important are things like getting a sleep schedule. So, although it's quite hard, if you wake up at 9 a.m. every weekday, trying to do that on the weekend as well to make sure that you're in that rhythm, it allows you to sleep quite a lot easier. Limiting screen time, caffeine, heavy meals before sleep. These are all things that you will probably have heard before. But the reason why we're repeating them here today is to let you know that there is such a relationship between these things and your productivity. Um, and of course, reserving your bed just for sleeping as well, having that compartmentalization of a place for rest and a place for socialization and a place for working as well can be really helpful. So we'll move forward. Getting your readings done. Another thing that people can potentially be slightly worried about with Cambridge is that there is more readings than you could possibly get through before your class. This idea that you have this mountainous effort to get through, and there's just no possible way. Um, so the three things that we would sort of respond to that with is this idea that actually you're not here to have all of the answers. Okay, it's this first idea that some people potentially have an assumption that the class is a place to kind of show off, is a place to have read everything and understand everything, and then go and just impress your tutors and impress your friends. But actually, what's even more sort of impressive in a way is to go and be really engaging with the class, and to not go with all the answers, but to go with questions. So this can be really helpful, especially if you're going through a reading and then at every moment of like not full understanding, you're then leaving the article or whatever it might be, the worksheet, to go into a different place, and then you're interrupting your flow of reading very often in order to get through the reading. And actually, what can be more helpful is to mark those places of misunderstanding or a lack of learning, or maybe a piece of vocab, for example, and you can make that notation for yourself, but you can do that whilst you're still reading. So without leaving the document in your browser, for example, or in front of you, so that your reading speed stays strong and quick as well. In terms of speaking of like reading speed, you should one of the things that you can do is calculate your reading speed, basically. So this will allow you to calculate how many um, of your readings you can get through um, before your class starts, essentially. So if I know that I can read 15 pages in an hour and I've got 100 pages to get through before my class, then I know that I can read X, Y, Z number of readings, and that more than that physically isn't possible for me. So having that information can be really powerful because it then gives you the possibility of saying, well, actually, it's impossible to read anymore, so I now feel okay about prioritizing the readings that are the most important, and then the ones that are potentially the least important to me personally, I feel more okay about either skimming those or skipping those. Um, and in terms of this prioritization process as well, one thing that can really help with that is using AI summaries on the or indeed abstracts of the readings that you're doing. And although this, of course, doesn't replace the reading itself, it can allow you to prioritize which ones are relevant to your research and which ones might actually be a distraction or a waste of time if you were to read them. Um, so those can be really helpful, basically. And if you have this feeling of, being at the foot of a mountain, having all of these readings and no idea of how to get through them, then going through these steps to make sure that it doesn't feel like such a mountainous task can be helpful. Um, but sometimes it's not a case of having too much to do. It's a case of your own personal relationship with work. And a lot of people, in fact, I think everyone in some way has struggled with procrastination. So the things that we want to share in terms of procrastination is basically just to discuss it not in terms of self-discipline, as it is quite often discussed as, but actually in terms of emotional regulation. So procrastination is essentially a coping mechanism, right? In terms of you're feeling a negative emotion about this idea of starting the piece of work for whatever it might be. In the case of perfectionism, it might be that you feel you can never get the piece of work to the standard that you expect of yourself, and so why even bother? Or there's that feeling of imperfection in yourself that is quite a negative feeling, and so procrastination becomes the coping mechanism to stop that. Um, so instead of thinking it in terms of self-discipline, in terms of like, oh, I just need to have more control over myself, actually, it's a moment to invite compassion for yourself and grace for yourself, and to think about maybe why those negative emotions are coming up, and to nurture yourself and to have a sort of positive self-dialogue, and to sort of coax that sort of more curious and um, yeah, the part of yourself that made you choose to do the degree or the master's or the PhD in the first place, to coax that out into doing the work. So we've got a couple of tips for starting procrastination. The first one is to think about what would be the very first step. I've got this quote here: if I was going to start now, what action would be the next step? And so more often than not, the difficulty isn't the task itself, it's just getting started. And so if you think about the very first thing, it might be even as simple as opening up your laptop and putting a coffee next to you because you know you can't start without a coffee. And so once you've got your laptop and your coffee, actually you're in a much better position than you were when you were just lying in bed moments earlier. So even as simple as setting yourself up and doing the first thing. Also, Pomodoro, a really helpful task to get people started and to continue on a nice rhythm. Um, You've probably heard of Pomodoro. It's the idea of potentially in groups as well, taking quite regular writing sessions and then breaks. So we actually offer something like that called Right Here, Right Now, which happens every Wednesday morning. So that's from 10 to 12:30 in the Sir David Williams room. And it's a really lovely space where everyone sort of shares their goals and then does 30 minutes, and an hour with breaks in between. And that sort of body doubling can be really helpful. So to have that sort of group consensus that this is a working time can really get your head down in a way. And yeah, as I was saying, the final tip is this compassion as well, this self-reflection on the negative emotion that has been associated with doing this task, if for whatever reason, giving yourself the grace and investigating in a way. So yeah. And finally, digital distractions. So this is the last obstacle that we're going to go through, and we want to bring this up in terms of productivity, but also, of course, this is something that will affect your mental health. Your relationship with your phone is going to be like any relationship in that it can be really positive, or it can also be quite negative as well. It's a thing I think in terms of habits that we want to talk about. It's not about never using social media ever again, but instead, maybe one thing that you've got into the habit of is using social media whenever there's a quiet moment, or using social media whenever you get bored, or whenever you have that negative emotion we were talking about previously, and it's a jerk reaction to open up Spotify or Instagram or whatever it might be. So instead, using social media intentionally is the thing that we really emphasize as the way to go forward. And one of the apps that can help you do that is something called Opal. So what that'll do is it'll make you take a deep breath before you open up Instagram, for example, and then it'll just jerk you out of that sort of automatic response that you may have been in previously, and it'll force you to take a moment to say, actually, do I want to be on Instagram right now? Is that the thing that I'm intentionally doing right now? And if it is, that's absolutely fine. It's nice to be in the loop and talk to friends and scroll through stories and all the rest of it. So and the other thing that is a potential danger with digital well-being is this idea of short-term dopamine that some people talk about with short-form content in particular. So this is Reels, YouTube Shorts, TikTok, and these are things that are really easy to do. Obviously, just scrolling through your phone and you get this instant burst of dopamine, and having that sort of dopamine high so often can make things that are low dopamine, like things that are rewarding in the long term, fairly more difficult actually to get started. So this is something to be aware of in your own self, and just thinking about your digital wellness and your own relationship to yeah your sort of short-term rewards and long-term rewards and things like that. Um, okay, so just making sure you're in control in terms of using your phone. So tips to help you turn off. These are some further tips to help you sort of develop that relationship with your phone. So when you're coming to the library, when you do intend to do a piece of work, a good idea might be to leave your phone in your drawer or in your bag when you go to the library. And then if this is sparking some negative feelings, maybe that's a moment of reflection as well. Also, again, compartmentalizing your spaces for work and for rest. So maybe there's a place where you do use social media, but it's compartmentalized into a certain part of your life. And when you're in the library, it's a place without social media, for example. But also moving around these different spaces can allow you to have a sort of refresh, and so that you're not sort of cooped in any way. Social media and emails are also something that people sort of have to get through in a way, especially if you wake up and you have, 30 emails and 40 messages. That's something that actually might take a fair amount of time. And so it's something that you have to do at some point throughout the day. And so if you put it on your to-do list, then rather than doing it as and when as they come up, it's something that is intentional. And that intentionality makes you keeps you in control of the situation. And of course, prioritizing rather than multitasking is really important in this sense, because of course if you get a text from a friend, that's something that can feel in the moment quite like important, but actually it's it's not something you have to deal with as and when. So if you put it as a task on your to-do list, you can do it in the morning, and then when you're in your essay writing mode, that's the thing you're focusing on. You're not multitasking on social media and emails and writing and all the rest of it at the same time. So as much as you can, protect the time that you've allotted to work for time for work only. Um, okay. So we're going to move on to now what we think good time management can kind of look like, and we're going to give you some tips and tricks for that. So we're going to go through exactly this: what, how, when, why, where, sorry, sort of list of things to go through. So obviously what you're doing, the task at hand, involves things like making a list, involves being really specific with the task that you're doing, and then of course how you're going to go and about and tackling that task, when you're going to do it. This is the sort of time management and like planning element of the list. Where you're going to do it is really important. So um, thinking about your desk space or whether you're going to the library, things like this, and then why as well. So this is something that Laura will go into slightly more as well, but having that self-knowledge and the reflection to understand why you're doing the task. So we're going to start off with what, and we're going to do a 2-minute mind sweep. So what I basically want everyone to do is to write everything down that has your attention at the moment. So this could be truly anything in terms of like things that you have been asked to do, things that you would like to do, things that you've been considering recently. Maybe you've seen a poster and you want to like investigate that further. Maybe you need to go and buy some more laundry detergent later today. Maybe you have an essay that's due at the end of the week. So everything that's sort of swirling around in your mind, it might be a bit of a maelstrom up there. Get it all down so it's all externalized. So that's going to take just about 2 minutes. So I will come back at in 2 minutes time and we'll have a little think. Okay. Thanks so much, everyone. All right, everyone, thank you so much for that. I hope that was a sort of useful experiment to see if you can get everything down and yeah, have a look at all of the different things that might be worrying you at the moment, everything that's taking up sort of mental space. I wonder if it feels slightly nicer now that it's not so much in here, but actually on a piece of paper or on your notes in your phone, for example. Um, so yeah, what we're going to do now is now that we have all of the things that are sort of taking up our mental space, things that we maybe have to do in the near future, we're going to think a little bit about the how. So now that we have our list of tasks, what are we going to do in order to, yeah, get these things done? So it may be that, with things like buying laundry detergent, that's quite a simple task. But actually, sometimes these academic tasks, we think of them in terms of quite broad categories. You might say, I need to write an essay, or I need to do my readings. And actually, this involves several individual steps that go into this broader task. So we have another 2-minute task. So it's going to be very short, like the last one. What I want you to do is to take an academic task, something like do my readings or um, write an essay, something like a broad academic task like that, and then just to think about all the individual steps that go into that. So if it is write an essay, then the first thing I want you to think about is using a database to go and find all of the necessary like secondary and primary material involved in that, for example. Okay, so I'm going to give you another 2 minutes for that, and then we'll come back and we'll keep going. Okay, thank you so much, everyone. So let's take what you've just written there and let's investigate it a little bit. So let's see what we can do with it. So there's this thing called SMART objectives, which you may have come across before, and it's a way of measuring the quality, basically, of the goal that you've set out for yourself. So we'll go through the elements that make up this really high quality objective. Um, so SMART is an acronym. It stands for specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So say, for example, I've got a little example here. I want to do more preparation for my classes. Maybe I'm a student, I've, had my first class, and actually I didn't get as much done as I'd like to. And now for my next class, I've set a goal for myself that I would like to be able to take part more so in my next class. So this is my goal that I've set for myself. However, do more preparation is this sort of nebulous and slightly strange goal that is not specific enough. So how would you make it more smart? And as we go along, I want you to maybe look at the objectives that you've written for yourself and see if there are any similarities and see if there's any ways that you could actually upgrade the objectives that you've made for yourself as well. So in terms of do more preparation, let's be more specific. What do you actually want out of the class that you're going to? Okay, well, specifically, I would like to be able to engage in the class discussions because by having read all of the relevant books and articles. Okay, lovely. So measurable. I just said all the books and articles. So maybe I actually need to make sure that I know the specific amount. So in terms of it being measurable, I'm going to make maybe 2 talking points or questions from everything that I read, so that I know that once I've done that, I can tick it off. And achievable, I'm going to measure my reading speed, for example. I know that I can read 15 pages an hour, whatever it was, and then I'm going to calculate how much I'm going to physically be able to read, and then I'm going to make it that many readings before the class. So as I was saying, not all of the class of the readings potentially. Relevant. So relevant in terms of smart objectives is a slightly broader category. This is the idea that you have these broader life goals, and your goals within that should be relevant to your sort of broad idea of like self, what you want out of life and the world. So relevant, maybe I'm a master's student and this is relevant to my broader goal of learning my subject and exploring the world of academia. And then time bound, this one comes with its own sort of um, yeah, deadline because of the class. But if this is a more sort of open-ended task, then you could embed one for yourself, and that would be helpful as well. So just have a look at the different tasks that you've written and see if there's any way that you could upgrade them by using these different points. But another way to break down the task, this sort of task I gave you moments earlier, can also be done by this really helpful tool. I would recommend that you use your sort of own intelligence in conjunction with this tool, but it can be really useful in terms of taking something like, for example, write a 4,000 word essay, as I've got here, which is, yeah, obviously a very large task. And what it will do is it will break it down into the sort of requisite tasks. And it can do either lots of breaking down, so that'll be these 5 chili peppers here, or just the one. So you can yeah, adjust that according to your needs. And so I've got 3 chili peppers here, sort of middle of the road. So I'll break it down. It comes up with something a bit like this. So all of the different parts you've got here, choose a topic for the essay. Okay, lovely. It's nice and simple. It makes sure that you're constantly making progress, taking things off. But even if you come across something that actually um, itself is quite a large task and needs to be broken down. Say, for example, this second one here, conduct preliminary research to gather information about the topic. Okay, well, that actually has maybe quite a few parts to it. Then I can just click the magic wand button that's over here to the right, and you can see you can break it down even further. And then any of these as well can be broken down as well. So this is something that if you are trying to break down a task, you can use to give yourself some inspiration, but actually it gets it right quite a lot of the time. So it can be a really useful tool to use. So that's on Goblin Tools, and absolutely. Okay, we're going to keep going. So the next thing to think about is when. So when is, of course, the sort of planning stage at the beginning of the week, what you're going to do with your time. So the first thing that you might want to think about is prioritization. If you have a very long list of tasks, which one are you going to do first? And so sometimes we think about this sort of matrix of urgent and important. And the basic principle of this, sorry, is just to say that urgency and importance aren't necessarily the same thing. So something that's hyper important might not actually be super urgent. Maybe you have something, you have to think of a thesis idea by January, but that's not for several months, so it's not something you have to do right now. However, something that's urgent and important, maybe you have a supervision tomorrow and you need to do some preparations for it. That's something that has to be done this very evening. So this can be, yeah, a way to think about things, and that can break them up and allow you to sort of make those judgment calls slightly easier. So of course, yeah, the urgent and important are things that you want to do right now. These might be something that's been sprung on you, for example, or something you've been putting off, but for whatever reason, it's an urgent task that requires your attention. As we're talking, there are also important tasks that aren't super urgent that can be moved around. These can even be like social engagements. Of course, it is important to call your mum, for example, but that can be moved around. So that's an example of an important non-urgent task. But then there are also these bottom line ones. I want to talk to you about distractions being like seeming urgent. Um, so when you do get a call, for example, from your mum, but you've called her 3 times already today, that's a non-important, maybe urgent task, whatever it might be. But these things are, yeah, things that can take over our attention immediately in the moment, and yeah, can take up quite a lot of time actually. And then also, yeah, non-urgent, not important. These are things that are maybe like downtime things that may make up a part of a very healthy schedule. Things like watching Netflix, scrolling social media, if that's something that you would do to unwind. But actually, it's understanding how much of these things that do take up your time, do you have to do it at all? If you are in a phase of urgency with something really important, then thinking about eliminating or declining, these things. Um, so when making plans, there are some things to consider to make a good weekly planner, whatever it might be. Of course, thinking about how long it will take is the first and foremost thing. This isn't always easy. It is generally better to give yourself some wiggle room because a task that you think might take an hour could take double that. So understanding that flexibility is a part of this, but calculating roughly how long it will take is the first step. And say, for example, you have all morning, say you have 3.5 hours or something in the morning before a class, or you have to go to some kind of sports event, and you have a 2-hour task, then what can you fit in that other slot to make the most of your time? So this is the benefit of planning, really, so that you make the most of your time when you are in that writing mode, knowing that you can slot these other things in. Um, so it's also a thing about knowing when you work best. I know, for example, a personal friend of mine who, falls asleep at 4 a.m. every day and goes to bed, whenever they kind of want, and they're thriving on that. However, I don't think that's maybe the most healthy way to do it, but if you do get your eureka moments past midnight, it can be something to think about. Or actually, a lot of people find that they are their very most productive in the morning, and then they're kind of useless after lunch. So this could even be a case of putting a sort of slightly easier task after lunch and piecing your tasks apart like a sort of jigsaw piece and putting them where they best fit. So the task that's maybe the most cerebral could be first thing in the morning, 9 to 12, and then a sort of do emails after lunch, whatever it might be, slightly easier task. And then it could be creative writing at midnight or painting at midnight, whatever it might be. You have so just for example. And then of course, yeah, different scales of planning are all really useful. However, whatever makes you feel the most sort of set up and in control. Having daily goals are important. Um, Knowing what you're going to do in a particularly busy day, but also every Monday, maybe setting up a nice schedule for the week can make you feel can have that sense of control as well. And we do have something called Manifest Mondays that we've started running. So that's something you can come to and get a little voucher to contribute towards your breakfast, and then to go through with Laura or I potentially any plans you might have, and make a little plan for the week ahead. Just start off feeling really like good and in control. And then having long-term plans, having termly or even yearly plans can keep you on top of sort of broader life goals, um, and can be really nice to set and then to look back on as well. So yeah, and as I was saying, you just can't control all of the things that go on in life. So maybe not planning for the worst case scenario every single time or considering, these sort of disasters, but giving yourself compassion if something does happen, and understanding that, the best laid plans of mice and men um, can, not always happen. So allowing space for that as well. So these are the planners that we have in our LibGuide, just to just give you a sense of what these look like. That's our long-term planner, the weekly one, and the daily one as well. So these are all available on our LibGuide. And yeah, these are also the ones that you can access at Manifest Monday as well. You might have a version of this that you do in your own calendar, but yeah, this can be a nice template to get started. So we're going to give you 5 minutes at this point to take one of those templates. And what I'd like you to do is just fill one of them all out, block out all the essentials. As I said, it's not just academic stuff that you want to put in these planners, but all your life stuff as well, because everything takes up time. Considering as well how long it takes maybe even to get to the library, you may have to go to the UL, which is just around the corner, or it may be Homerton, which is slightly further, for example. And then have a look at the time you have left for sort of maybe more expansive tasks. And yeah, give it a little bit of a think, whatever makes the most sense for your priorities at the moment. So I'll give you 5 minutes for that, and I'll be back very shortly. Thank you so much. Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much, guys. I hope that was helpful. So we're going to move on now. We are slightly pressed for time, ironically. So we're going to keep going as quickly as we can. So yeah, we're going to keep going and think about where you're doing your work. So again, this is about reiterating things that can feel slightly basic, but that are incredibly important to consider. So this might be a moment to take a look at your own desk where you're sitting right now, watching this, and take a look and see if it's a place where you do feel comfortable, and if there are lots of notes, for example, that you don't really know what they are, or it's a quite a cramped space. Try and yeah, if there are ways of making it more suitable to your purposes, maybe introducing a lamp or clearing away some of the clutter, making sure it's a space specifically meant for your work. There might be a bunch of other things for different tasks on this desk. So maybe if your at home desk feels like that, using a library or a cafe, whatever feels comfortable to you. Thinking about the light that's in this place for you. Um, you don't want to be in a place with no windows, for example, unless you're a little gremlin. Or if your chair feels comfortable, or there might be a lot of distractions. Again, this is something to think about at home. Maybe using a library might be more comfortable for you. Um, so taking time to think about your own sort of spatial organization can be something really helpful to think about moving forward, getting set up for a good session of work. Um, so, but there's also different sort of places of organization. So, thinking about where you put your notes and how you organize them. So, if you do physical notes, we recommend that you back them up as well. So, there's lots of different ways to make notes, of course. Um, if you have notebooks, for example, it might be an idea to organize these by term, so having just one for Michaelmas or one for Hillary, or you could organize them by topic. So if you start a new essay, you start a new notebook, and these are quite affordable, so it's definitely possible to have these sort of like quite specific notebooks. Post-its as well for your own sort of desk space can be really useful, like a visual way. Maybe if it's quite easy to forget things if they're not in your line of sight. Something that's quite urgent can be good to post it somewhere really visible, so you make sure you see it. Diaries as well, of course, we recommend that everyone here has a calendar in some sense, but a physical diary can be really useful to, in the moment, put things in the diary and have that physically there as well. And bullet journals are something quite popular as well. So there's lots of examples of these on YouTube that are really quite beautiful, some of them, but they are a place to put everything, to consolidate all of the different aspects that you might be going through. Um, so they'll have like monthly views, weekly views, project planning, notes as well. They'll often have a coding system to sort of understand things throughout the journal as well. And it's a place as well to do like mindfulness, to have a sort of reflective space within the journal as well. So they can be really useful. You'll also obviously have a lot of digital notes, so this is something to be aware of how you're organizing that as well. So of course, not to use your desktop because that can get cluttered quite easily, but instead using these folders. And we recommend using um, quite specific folders. So not to be afraid of putting folders within folders, so that you know exactly where things are like organized by category, quite obviously, rather than having a lot of things that are quite overwhelming in one space, as you can see on this sort of example of maybe how not to do it on the right. You've got, for example, you know, reading and then reading two is obviously not very specific. It'll be very difficult to understand when you come back a year later. It might be to come to do your revision. So yeah, absolutely to think about a different way to name all of these files. We have a sort of tip here that you might want to use in your own naming your files. So you'd start out with the prefix. So this would be the document type, for example. So maybe report or notes or essay followed by meaningful document title. So for example, Austin Gothic horror or whatever it might be, version 3, and then the date as well. So in this way, I know exactly what I'm getting when I open up my file, because I've named it in such a way. So that's that. Then we're on to our final part, is the why. So this is all about motivation, understanding why you're doing your goal, is, yeah, in and itself motivating. And this is really important in terms of productivity. It's not just a case of your own well-being, but also when you're motivated to do a task, you're not only going to do it quicker, you're also going to do it better because it is fun and rewarding. So having the understanding of why you're doing your task and knowing that it is actually something that you would like to do is something that's really important for your own productivity. And if you do end in this sort of like burnout or overwhelm, then it can totally crash any sense of motivation, which is why breaks are actually so important. And it's important to take a break before that happens. So preempting these things and putting them in way before anything like that happens is really important. So of course, timetabling breaks into your day is, yeah, super powerful. And that's kind of where the idea that a Pomodoro comes from, in terms of like scheduling these breaks. Of course, motivation is not a given, for a number of reasons for certain people. So if motivation is seeming hard, I've just given the email for Kirsten, who's our well-being advisor. So do shoot her an email if you are experiencing any sort of hardship in terms of motivation. But of course, also talking to Laura and I if it is to like affecting your productivity as well, and we can help with the sort of essay and academic skills element of anything you're struggling with. Um, but I want to leave you with some tools. So we're going to go through basically not what they are in a lot of detail, but of course, because this will be circulated and obviously you'll have the recording as well, you'll be able to come back and look at these. But these are just some really useful things that if you are looking for a tool, I'd recommend you go through. So we have, for example, online calendars. Outlook, Google, and Apple all have really good ones that I recommend using. I personally use the Google Calendar, I find really useful. To-do lists, there's a lot of online versions of that. Microsoft To Do can be like interlinked with your sort of Outlook email really easily. Reminders as well, project management. If you have a sort of group task, you can all get onto the same Trello. So that can be really helpful. And then, of course, you can have your sort of physical bullet journal, or there are also apps that sort of do a similar thing, such as Notion and AnyDo as well. So if any of those seem useful, I do recommend just giving them a little look. And thank you so much, everyone. So yeah, the last thing I want to leave you with is just this idea of flexibility. Of course, Cambridge is this beautiful place where you can talk to the most incredible and smart and intelligent people, but it can be obviously really stressful and quite daunting at times as well. And I know that there can be a lot of pressure to be constantly outputting productivity and to constantly be doing something that feels, productive, even if you're in your sort of rest state, you're still watching, um, you know, the most incredible movie, or you're like learning Duolingo on the side, and it feels like there can't be a moment to rest. Well, actually, what we're trying to say is that this healthy productivity and the best form of productivity is the one that allows you to do it sustainably, and that one that allows you to keep motivated and happy, because actually in the long run that will make you more productive, although of course your happiness and your well-being is paramount. And included in that is this idea that things will crop up, and giving yourself the compassion to allow for those things is totally normal as well. So even if you make the best plan in the universe, you may not be able to enact it because of the way that life ebbs and flows. But these are our tips, and if anything does come up, of course, you've got Laura and I, or you do have Kirsten as well. So that's everything from me. I think I will hand over to Laura.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Connor. Some really great tips there. So yeah, if you stop sharing, I will then
Yeah.
present in Teams. Sorry, it's just being a little bit slow loading up. You might just want to take a break here for a minute or two, stretch your legs, get something to drink just while I'm waiting for it to come through. Okay, I think it's showing up now. Okay, so hopefully that's now showing you the reflective practice section of this presentation. And I think this dovetails really nicely into all the things that Connor was saying, which are lots of kind of really handy tips for day-to-day thinking about how you can best manage your time. But I think reflective practice is kind of bigger than that. It's a kind of philosophy. It's kind of like how you approach your learning more broadly, but I do think it makes you much more productive in the long run. So I hope you will agree with me. I'm going to run through a few different elements of it, what it is. There's quite a lot of kind of theory, educational theory around reflective practice and its importance and its value. So just very quickly to touch on some of that. And then we'll really get into kind of how you can be a reflective learner. What can you actively do to kind of help you think about how things are going for you and how to improve them. So I'm going to start with a really quick activity and just show you an image here and just ask you to reflect on it. So I'm going to keep that kind of broad now until I actually kind of reveal what we might mean by that. So literally kind of 30 seconds, have a quick look at that image and kind of what's your gut reflection to that. You could write it down so you've got a note of it, or you could just think about it. Okay, so I've already given you a bit of a clue on that slide as to what being reflective is, and that is not describing it. So hopefully you're not just looking at that thinking it's a beach and a sea with two people holding surfboards. To be reflective is to kind of think about how it makes you feel. So for me, I feel quite sad that outside it's autumn and this is a picture of the sun and it looks quite warm on that beach, and I would love to be back in the summer and somewhere hot right now. So that's my emotive response to that image. And when we're talking about reflective practice in terms of learning, we're thinking about how it makes us feel, not actually what happened in that supervision or that lecture or that essay, but actually how did we respond to that experience. So a large part of being reflective is really thinking about why did things happen in the way that they did. And this can be a really positive experience. It might be that actually, yeah, you submit an essay and you got a great result, you had your supervision, you got some excellent feedback. That gives you a really positive emotional response to that. So that's fantastic. But it might also be the opposite, that something didn't go quite so well and that it makes you feel really low. And that's therefore going to impact on how productive you're going to be next time when you replicate that. If you have a similar sort of task that you have to carry out, we tend to draw on those emotions of our past experiences. And if something makes us feel horrible, we don't really want to do it. And that's when things like procrastination can come in. Like Connor said, it's an emotive response. That it's not because we're lazy, it's because we're fighting something internally. Equally, when something goes really well, sometimes we just think, yeah, okay, I've mastered it now, and we don't actually kind of think about how we approach our learning the next time, and we don't actually learn from what went well last time. We just kind of plow in without even thinking about it. So I think it works both ways this. So we can all be reflective learners, however our educational experience is going. But yeah, the big thing is to think about these connections between our past, what's happened, what we're currently doing, the present, and then our future. How can we make sure that we achieve our potential? So, we're always being reflective. You might bump into someone who might say, "Oh, how was your day? How did today go?" And you might say, "Oh, I had a rubbish day actually. I really intended to do loads of reading, but then I went to the library and the books weren't there. So then I ended up having to go online and I found some stuff that wasn't really relevant." Immediately, you're kind of reflecting, thinking, "Okay, so what didn't go well there? Okay, I hadn't planned, far enough in advance. Next time I do it, what does that mean? I'm going to need to make sure the resources I need are in the library." So it's that follow through. It's that initial gut, like, "Oh, things went really badly." You're reflecting on how the day went, but the most important thing for you to do is to learn from it. What we do with that emotional response and how we then change our behavior going forward. So, like I said, there are several kind of models of reflection out there. Some are more complex than others. As you can see, there's a couple of 3-stage processes. There are some 6-stage processes. I'm sure there are kind of more that are even multifaceted than this. But the one that I quite like is this idea of just a really simple, what happened. So that is a little bit descriptive so that you've got a record, the kind of so what, who cares how it went? Well, I care because it made me feel this way or it impacted my learning in this way. And then the now what? Now what am I going to do? How am I going to change things going forward? So that's really clearly the kind of past, present and future type model. But all of them, the importance is that they're iterative, that we're constantly learning from our experiences. We never have it sorted. And that's something that, Connor and I often say in terms of our academic skills support that we offer. You can always become a better learner or a better researcher. And for that reason, we often have postdocs or academic staff coming to us as well. It's not like anyone really ever kind of cracks the code because we're all learning, we're all changing, we're all looking for new ways of making things more efficient, more effective, or being a better communicator, whatever it is. There's ways of learning from our past experiences and improving on them. So, yeah, how is this linked to being productive? Like I've said, this stops us repeating our mistakes. We often think about things that make us feel uncomfortable. We might just want to blinker them off and not look at them. But actually, if we can really be confident, in approaching what's not gone so well, then we can potentially avoid those mistakes in the future. We can plan our time. Connor talked a little bit about that idea of working out roughly how long it takes us to read a certain amount of pages. If you've got a little gap of an hour, being realistic then about what you might be able to achieve in that hour, because we've had some experience. So it can be little things. Being reflective can just be keeping a little journal and just keeping a note and making sure that you kind of aren't being too over ambitious. You're not saying I'm going to read 10 books in 1 hour. Like we said, in between times, we can then identify if we've got a particular issue or a problem. We can arrange to meet one-to-one with somebody to try and address a few skills gaps that we might have. And it just helps us feel better prepared because, as we know, academic work's always going to be a roller coaster. There's going to be some good times and some bad times, but the better prepared we are, the more that we can take those difficult times in our stride and realize that it's all just part of the learning experience. Again, this isn't about kind of failure ourselves. So how can we be more reflective? Reflective writing is one of the easiest ways to do that. Like I've said, often we do chat to people quite reflectively. We do often kind of talk about what went well, what didn't, who's annoying us, in our department today, or who do we get on really well with and who do we feel kind of really positive when we're working with them. We do all this reflection all the time, but sometimes it's difficult to capture that. So it's really good practice to kind of get into the habit of having a little journal, which can be paper-based, or it might just be a Word document that you have online, and just to get some of these thoughts out. Like Connor said with the mind sweep, it's quite good sometimes just to kind of evacuate everything that's in your brain and that's taking up brain space and that's kind of feeling noisy and stopping you focusing on your work. But another reason as well is that it just means you've got something to kind of go back to as well and look at after the event. Sometimes in the moment it's quite difficult to see clearly. And the nice thing about reflective writing is no one else is looking. You're not getting marked on this, so you don't need to worry about spelling or grammar. You can just be totally uninhibited, just get it all out. Be sensible about it and perhaps say, I'm going to just spend 10 minutes doing this at the end of the day, or even 5 minutes. I just want to kind of situate where my learning is right now, and then go back to it maybe the next day, maybe even a week later if something's gone really badly and you just need a little bit of time to come back and think, okay, what are my takeaways from this? What have I learned from that experience? If I feel I'm really not confident about my writing, what am I going to do? Okay, I could book a writing consultation. I could arrange to go to a workshop. I could get one of the books out of the library that's all about, effective academic writing, but just to do something about what you've written down. Why do we not do this? Often we think we're really time poor. We're really super busy. And like Connor said, but with our prioritization, there's always going to be things we can cut. And this is a really easy one, because if no one's looking and no one's going to hold you accountable, what does it matter if you do it or not? But I think there's a reason why a lot of people keep diaries. At the end of the day, it is a way of processing what's happened. So I think trying to make even just a couple of minutes a day can be really valuable in that way. And actually, particularly for any of you who are part-time students, actually having some kind of research diary is quite useful practice, because it might be that you're only working on your research a couple of days a week, and you might need to kind of work out where you were up to in your thinking, and you can just kind of pick up where you left off. It's not something we're very skilled at, particularly talking about uncomfortable feelings. We err away from that. So it does take a little bit of practice to get good at reflective writing. Kind of why are we doing it? Again, you don't want to just feel like it's pointless, that I'm just writing all this down. So again, making a little promise to yourself that if you identify there's an area where you might need to develop skills, you're going to do something about it. You might need a nice environment, so maybe a nice notebook. You might need to, maybe you want to set up a private blog, and it just kind of looks a bit different and it feels like there's purpose to kind of doing that writing. Maybe you want to make a promise with a friend. Maybe you're just not part of a culture where people talk honestly about their writing. A lot of people come to us feeling like an imposter, like they're the only person who might be struggling. And actually, the more we talk about it with other people, we realize that everybody's finding challenges in their work at every stage. You don't have to share what you write with other people, but just, again, building a kind of culture where it's kind of healthy to reflect on how things are going. And that is often the biggest obstacle. It's kind of it's a kind of lump to get over, this idea of being honest with ourselves. And I've mentioned already, a lot of the time, the way that we can most effectively reflect is to kind of think about negative experiences. And this really kind of helps us understand where we're going as a researcher. And there's actually lots and lots of research out there. And I've put a slide at the very end of this presentation with a series of references. So if this is something you're interested in following up in a little bit more detail, I would recommend some of these articles to you. But I think it's so important to realize that we're all going to fail at different stages in different ways. And how you define that will, of course, be different. But it might just be that a piece of writing didn't go well. It might be that you felt unprepared for a seminar where you were meant to have done some reading. It might be that you set out on your research and you had some research questions, and actually when you get into the field you realize that you're kind of asking the wrong questions. At every single stage there will be elements of what you might consider failure, things not going as well as you hoped they would. But I really like this phrase about failing successfully, the idea that, yeah, it's going to happen. It's not that it's happened that's the problem, it's what you do with that. And if we just brush it under the carpet, that means that we're never going to learn from that experience. But failing successfully means we learn about ourselves, we learn about the research culture in our department, we learn about the complexities of what research is, and it means that we can kind of write honestly about them when we come to write up the work that we've been doing. So there's a nice sort of set of questions here. And of course, what we don't want to do when we're talking about some of these time management strategies is give you more work to do. That's not the idea at all. But it is the hope that from learning from what we do and how our research is going, it just means that we can save ourselves quite a lot of time in the future. So just identifying, what went wrong, why it went wrong, what's going to be the impact of this? Is this going to kind of totally change the way our research works? Who do we need to kind of involve in this process? Again, we don't want to be embarrassed by the fact that something's gone wrong. We need to get people on board really quickly. That might be to support us personally. It might be in order to kind of redirect our research projects. So talking to your supervisor and being open about that. It might just be talking to other peers, to work out kind of how they've overcome sort of similar challenges as well. And I've put a link in this slide here to a nice little table that kind of can give structure to critiquing your failure, so that you're not on your own. You haven't got that blank page when you come to do your reflective writing. There's kind of a way of ordering your thoughts around it. So yeah, I think it's really important not to avoid these feelings. It can definitely impact the way that we do research. If you are conducting some qualitative research in a kind of a group of people that kind of are very different to you in whatever way that might be, it might make you more reluctant to be open, to be honest, to conduct your research freely. It's going to kind of change the nature of your research. And unless we're constantly critiquing that and being really self-aware of how our feelings are impacting our research, it might be that if you're based in a lab, that there's certain people you don't get on with, and that just kind of stops you exploring your research in certain ways, and you kind of start avoiding doing certain types of research because you have to work with certain people. again, we need to kind of be aware of that and attuned to that, and again, try and work to rectify some of these problems. So yeah, there's a really great article, sort of blog by Chadwick, which is on the London School of Economics research blog. There's some really interesting papers on there. It's worth having a look at, and just to kind of think about how we can kind of feel comfortable in these uncomfortable spaces and kind of take ownership of some of these emotions and see them really positively and see how they're kind of shaping our research practices. Okay, so we're just going to take a little break here and give you an activity. Think about an educational encounter. And this is really broad, very deliberately, because we've got people joining us who might be on taught programs, people doing research programs, who are working full-time, part-time. So this could be last time you sat an exam. It could be when you were last in a supervision, or you attended an online lecture. And there's a few little cue questions here, but just write freely about how you were feeling, what went well, what didn't go so well. Have you changed any of your practices as a result of the things going well or otherwise? And in that sort of cycle, if we go back to that idea of kind of, the what happened, the so what, and, what are we going to do about it? Just think about those 3 points. So we'll just take a 4-minute break, just to give you the opportunity to do a little bit of free writing. And like I said, don't worry about punctuation or spelling, just get it down. Okay, so hopefully that didn't feel too uncomfortable and it's something that you feel you might be able to get into by way of a bit of a habit. And there's just this kind of little sort of graphic here, just again to kind of think about structuring the way that you are reflective, look back, think about, how you felt, think about how you approach things, think about how your knowledge and understanding has changed as a result of some sort of experience, and then think about what you might do differently next time, whether you're in a similar situation or preempting some of the challenges that you might face. Again, that's part of this ability to kind of look forward and think, okay, well, actually, it went quite well last time, but I did have this moment where I thought maybe this was going to happen and it didn't. And if you can prepare yourself mentally for that, again, hopefully that's going to save you time in the future. So finally, yeah, just thinking a little bit more about kind of how you're going to improve your skills development. And one of the reasons we do this session quite near the start of the term is just to kind of signpost some of the ways that we can best support you. So think about having some sort of personal development plan. Now, some of you will be on a program, particularly PhD programs, where you are expected to have a personal development plan. Nobody expects you to have all the skills at the very start of your degree. That's why you're undertaking it. It's not just about taking on board content, it's about developing skills. And so there might be new software that you need to kind of get to grips with. There might be new research methodologies that you're just unfamiliar with. It might just be a slightly new writing style because you've gone up a kind of level, or maybe you've moved into a different discipline. Whatever it is, I'm sure you know that there are things that you would like to kind of brush up on. And so doing a little bit of free writing, identifying where you feel really strong, where you feel really weak. And it might not be that you're bad at something. The fact that everybody's here at Cambridge suggests that you're all, perfectly capable, but sometimes just doing the reading feels really overwhelming, and you can do it and you will get there, but you just perhaps feel that your strategies aren't as effective as they might be, or that you can take notes, you've got loads of them, you're surrounded by them, but you kind of feel that actually when you come to write up, it's just a little bit of extra effort to kind of find the things that you wrote down. You're not really sure where you put things. You then sometimes can get a bit confused about whether you wrote them or whether they're direct citations from things that you're reading. So again, you might just need a new note-taking strategy. And that's where people like Connor and I can come in. So just thinking a little bit about how can you develop skills. We've got this program of workshops that run every other week during term time. So have a look at the program. We'll be looking at literature searching, reference management, critical thinking, academic writing, kind of reading tips as well. And then we'll have some kind of more research-based skills topics next year. The university training booking system, we've put the URL on the slide there. They run loads of courses that are running synchronously, but also asynchronously, things that you can just be self-guided and you can pick up a skill, particularly on things like software. There's some really great self-guided training out there. And of course, your faculty and department, if they identify it's something you need for your course, will offer training. But there's lots of other ways, like we said already, that we've got a really great academic skills collection in here at the library, lots of books on research methods, if that's something you just want to kind of get to grips with in your own time. Some super blogs out there. The Thesis Whisperer is a really great one. Inga Mewburn's been writing that for years, and that just, again, helps demonstrate that you're not alone. You're not the only person out there, finding these things challenging. Lots of instructional, YouTube videos or podcasts. Speak to peers. Like I said, lots of people will be struggling with things. And I think suddenly, you can go to a workshop and think, oh, actually, there's 10 other people here. Or, obviously for all of us, this is something we'd like to improve on. So I think there's definite value in speaking to others and being confident in raising that. But do come and see us one-to-one if you'd like some bespoke support as well. Okay, so that's it for today. If you've got any questions, approach us personally, come and knock on our door. We've also got our own range of asynchronous resources on the College LibGuide as well. And things like those templates that we worked on earlier, those are loaded on there, so you can work through those in your own time. And there's the link to the references. Okay, we're going to stop the recording now, but thanks very much for joining us, and we hope that you'll join us at another one of our workshops soon.